Greetings, Coach Fleischer here, and in this lecture we'll be talking about strength versus power. So in the context of working out, you have different types of exercise, and so far we've really just talked about strength training, and there is a difference between strength versus power, and the key factor you have in strength versus power is how an exercise is implemented, but more accurately, the amount of speed and the amount of force that's applied in a given amount of time matters. There is a difference between doing a deadlift, where you're pulling weight up from the floor and you can take as long as you like, to doing a power clean where you have to be technically proficient to be explosive as heck to get that bar and hoist it up to the shoulders in as short amount of time as possible. So strength versus power has its place, and quite frankly, you could have an exercise where you start off with a slower, more controlled movement pattern, perhaps like a squat. A squat would be knee flexion and extension, hip flexion and extension with a bar on one's shoulders. That's more strength oriented, to where a client or a customer or an athlete is doing box jumps, where they're jumping from the floor up onto a box. Small counter movement by bending the knees, small counter movement by bending the hips, much like you'd see in a squat. Because they're jumping onto a box in as short amount of time as possible, it becomes more power oriented. And that's really the key to that whole process, and we'll talk more here in a second. But first, I would like to get into a little bit of a review. And in this review, we talked last time about modalities, right? We've talked a little bit about types of resistance, also multi-joint and single joint exercises, and phasing, positive and negative. And really, from the last presentation we had modalities, and modalities were specific to cardiovascular, strength training, and balance really are your big three. And you can combine those. You can combine doing, say, a dumbbell bicep curl kneeling on a physio ball, or doing squats standing on a BOSU. Absolutely. That is totally appropriate to do that. And actually, in some regards, it's of benefit to do that because you have a heightened or an increased response, because you're layering in a different challenge into the workout itself. So totally appropriate to do that. And believe me, that'll be a true-false question somewhere on a check for learning. So, well, the key components of strength versus power, right? If I ask you to push a boulder across the floor, and you're pushing it from one side of the room to the other, and you're pushing this boulder for 20 feet, well, you know the weight of the boulder, you know how far you're pushing the boulder. That's work, right? And if I then ask you to take the same boulder, and instead of pushing it on a flat surface, I ask you to push it up a hill, same boulder, same weight, same distance, but by pushing it up a hill, you've increased your workload. So walking up the sledding hill, right, is different than walking on flat grass. You're doing more work when you either walk or run up that sledding hill. All right, cool, got it. But the minute I ask you to push that boulder across the floor, up that hill, and ask you to do it in the shortest amount of time possible, it becomes more power oriented. Power oriented because, quite frankly, power is work divided by time, right? So you have mass times distance over time. So I'm asking you to push this 500-pound boulder 20 meters as fast as possible. That is more power oriented. So it's the same modality, the boulder, same exercise, pushing it. It becomes power oriented because I'm asking you to do it in the shortest amount of time possible. And you'll often see that measurement done in like newtons or joules, etc., when you get into higher level classes. But for the sake of our class and working out, realize that fundamental difference, and you can't go wrong in this class. Good? All right. So for today, if you have an exercise that is perhaps a squat or a lunge, think of how you can make that more power oriented. What can you change in the exercise itself to actually make it more power oriented? A squat could become a box jump. A lunge could become a split squat. A jog of 20 meters could be sprinting as quick as possible for those 20 meters. Think of different ways you can make your work more power oriented. And with that, enjoy your workout.